Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar organized by JetBrains. I'm Paul Everett, Python developer advocate. I'll be your host. And I just made the mistake that I told Sajan I was going to make. I started talking too early. The topic for today's webinar is faster Python development with Reloadium with Sajan Thapa. Sajan is a business psychologist specializing in the areas of business development, change management, and human factors, and he's co-founder of Reloadware, hot module reloading for Python. Welcome, Sajan.
Hi, Paul. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be a part of this webinar. I'm very excited.
So, business psychologist.
Yes, I'm currently specializing in business psychology. Although I'm not technically savvy with Python, I joined this project to help provide a different perspective from a strategic stance and to help visualize its benefits for Python developers as a productivity optimization tool. I help with understanding the end user experience and how we can better cater to the needs.
I'm going to give my elevator pitch for it, then turn it over to you for some background. Reloadium improves developer productivity by really speeding up turnaround time. That's the way I look at it. Tell us a little bit about Damien and tell us a little bit about how he got involved in this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually met Damien, the big brain behind this project, when I was doing my postgrad in Brisbane. He worked at the student accommodation where I stayed as their in-house handyman, IT guy, and an all-rounder. And when I first met him, he was, sent by the accommodation management to help set up my study area. It was a very hot and humid day in Brisbane at the time, and he just rocked up in short shorts, a singlet, and a table much larger than himself. And that's how we met. As for how Damien got involved with the idea for Reloadium, he had been working in the data science space, and given his background in JavaScript, he started noticing more and more that the absence of hot module reloading capabilities on Python made it a very slow process for him and his colleagues to do a lot of tasks. Now, this often meant pushing back deadlines and a lot of disruption to their workflow. He saw this problem as an opportunity to make a difference in this space and to create something that could make the lives of many developers so much easier. So Damien quit his job and practically went into hermitage. He would be locked up in his room to create a very complex and complicated tool. He worked on this full time for almost a year and then decided to release the beta version of Reloadium's plugin for PyCharm on JetBrains Marketplace. And straight away, we had received a lot of positive feedback, lots of GitHub stars. Reloadium landed on the front page of Hacker News, and overall, it was the rightful confirmation we were looking for to validate the need for a hot reloading tool in Python.
And you mentioned that Hacker News article. It was last year, and he does a lot of replies on there. And there's one person that's like, well, I don't know. Is this legit? And he said, I've been working on this for a year. It has thousands of tests, and I didn't even announce it until it passed all the tests. And the guy replied with, oh, okay. I
Yeah,
guess
very meticulous.
it's crazy. Okay, let's go to the slides. We'd like to make this slide advance. We'd like to make this webinar as live and conversational as possible. This is a topic that everyone in the chat needs to be thinking about and loaded in your brain because it's an important and hard topic. So we want to make it as live as possible. Should you have any questions or problems during the webinar, please feel free to ask them at any time. Don't wait until the end. You'll see me looking over here and hi, Derek, hi, Keenan, etc. And we'll try and engage with you as we go along. Feel free to engage with each other. So we're using the chat in YouTube. We're also in Twitch. And we'll have a few pauses during the webinar where Sajan and I will collect some of the questions, maybe expand on some of the topics that are going on in the chat. Usually the most frequently asked question is this thing being recorded? I always joke. We put this slide up 2 minutes from now in chat. Someone's going to say, is this thing being recorded? Yes, it's being recorded. We will announce it on the blog later, but it's YouTube, so it's going to be available essentially immediately after we finish. All right, we're going to talk a little bit to kind of frame this for you because this is, HMR, hot module reloading. What is this stuff? So we're going to frame it, and then we're going to get into some demos. Let's start with the why. Why are we inflicting on you, friendly Python developer, yet another 3-letter acronym, HMR, hot module reloading? Sajan, why reloading?
Well, Paul, reloading, hot module reloading is a valuable tool for developers. When developers make changes to existing source code, they are required to restart the whole program. And this can take anywhere from a few seconds to north of 5 to 10 minutes. And although other languages such as Java and JavaScript have a hot reloading solution, its absence in Python introduces a common problem for Python developers. It is actually even more severe with complex libraries and analysis involved in data sciences. Reloading is also valuable because making changes to program is a dynamic activity. Developers may experiment with a lot of changes and implementations, which require the program to be restarted many times. And the amount of time that it takes to implement these changes can soon add up and become one of the biggest disruptors to their productivity.
So a couple of points. First, apologies for Sajan. Everyone in chat, give us a little bit of feedback here. Are you familiar with hot module reloading? Do any of you have any experience with this in like the world of front ends? Two things you said jump out at me. You're right that some of these restarts where there's a lot of state to compute can take a good bit of time. Maybe it's 30 seconds, maybe it's 5 to 10 minutes. But on your last point, it's a very subtle one. You probably are familiar with it. These studies that show the human brain notices 500 milliseconds of delay or something like that. And once you go over that budget, you start making the brain context switch and get distracted. And so even if someone says, oh, well, my Django server restarts in 3 seconds. Imagine if your IDE, imagine if your editor, if you pressed a letter and it took 2 seconds to appear on the screen, you'd be pretty pissed off. So striving for this faster feedback is a valuable goal. So let's talk about, that's reloading in general. Let's talk about Reloadium, the software.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Reloadium offers Python developers with a hot reloading solution, and basically shortening the development cycle and preserving the application state for debugging. Reloadium also improves workflow with the help of time and memory profiling tools, one of our features. And although we have, a proof of concept with other IDEs, right now we're primarily focused on our PyCharm plugin integration. This makes Reloadium easy to use and offers additional features to develop functions, methods, or module bodies while debugging. Reloadium enables users to make changes instantly. So basically, when what would otherwise take minutes to execute can be done in milliseconds. These changes can also get implemented on the dependent code lines and modules across the whole project. This would mean that the only line of code that are related to the change are executed. This ultimately prevents unwanted side effects or introduction of bugs and errors. We see Reloadium as a powerful tool for improving workflow and streamlining development. And actually, when Damien started working on this dev tool, he was stumped as to what to call it. He has always been a big fan of chemistry, and because of his, predictable nature as well as his unpredictability. But more importantly, he was also binge watching Breaking Bad at the time. So the more he worked on this project, the more success he was having with the solution, and he saw the value in what it could bring to the Python development community. And Damien thought this hot reloading tool could be seen as the missing element of Python, so it was named Reloadium.
Love the name. Toby mentions in chat that he's looked at some other solutions in Python. If any of you have any experience with any reloading in Python, let us know in the chat. Something that you mentioned about the out-of-the-box experience, the PyCharm plugin, which we'll show in a bit, does that. But something I found really interesting in what you're doing with Reloadium is, especially with the IDE plugin, is it's like you're rethinking development. It feels different than the normal, regular way of doing development. It's subtle in some ways. It's very obvious in others, like when you do the inline error message kind of thing, so you don't have to go find the traceback. And so I'm just interested, intellectually curious, where this is all going to wind up going. Now, there's more than just Reloadium, the software. We'll get to that in a second. We'll talk a little bit about how Reloadium works. Sajan, you'll talk a little bit about it. I'll talk a little bit from my research on it. You go first.
Yeah, sure. I guess Reloadium gives you an out-of-the-box experience for both front-end and back-end development. It has a lot of different user experience features to provide instant feedback to developers in relation to how it is working with like different color codes and flashes based on the types of activity being done. So like say, for example, orange flash would mean the code is being redefined, and a blue flash might mean the the frame code is being re-executed. And I guess as an outsider to Python programming, it took me a while to grasp the concept of how Reloadium works. But basically, Reloadium allows developers to make updates directly through the application's source code without having to do manual application restarts. This means developers can essentially edit and continue without any noticeable delay. This is very valuable in saving time and improving the efficiency of a development cycle. Ultimately, a tool like this can better facilitate a more suitable environment for developers to maintain concentration and stay in an undisrupted state of flow.
Yep. Stay in the flow. Way to say it. I'll add a little bit on top of that. Let's say you're in a function and you put a breakpoint in the debugger and you stop the execution in that function. You're in a frame on the stack, and what Reloadium does is it notices, let's say that you change something in that function. It notices there was a change in that function, and it takes the new function and executes it, like interprets it in Python, executes it in a sandbox separate from the execution that you're in, gets the Python object for that function frame, and then copies it over and replaces the frame that you were in. I think that's the best way to describe it. It works a little bit beyond frames. It'll also work at module level. It will work in multiple files. And it will, to a degree, track dependencies. This is something Jurigged doesn't do. Some of the other solutions, so that if I have a function that either imports a constant from somewhere else or was passed in a value or a class or whatever, if that other thing changes under usual circumstances, it will know that that function needs to be re-executed. This is hard stuff. Python doesn't make it easy. And so Damien has all the scars to back up that point. He's had to do special cases for certain frameworks and stuff, which also means he has to be kind of conservative about what he's able to do. And if he can't do it, it's a full reload. Something Keenan brought up about games and Turtle, that's a really cool idea about teaching. The Reloadium website under features has a tab for Pygame that I believe shows the use of Reloadium in a game environment. Okay, next point. Reloadium isn't just a software package on PyPI. There's a company behind it. Sajan, tell me about that.
Yeah, sure. I guess we want to continue to work on tools that make programming more developer friendly and accessible so that people can feel free to design and create and innovate. And to do this, we're forming a company named Reloadware. This company will focus on developer tools like Reloadium, which significantly improves productivity and ultimately helps in making programming easier. We are very excited to create new solutions while managing and improving products like Reloadium so that it stays relevant and continues to help developers with their workflow optimization. It probably also, reduces future scars for Damien, so he doesn't have to bear it all by himself.
And I'll just go on a side tangent rant. Even if you don't believe in hot module reloading, even if you don't believe in Reloadium, you should cheer for the company Reloadware, because open source needs to be sustainable, and people who put in hard work that benefits companies that have 27 digits of stock market valuation should get to participate in some of that value. Rant off. Okay, we will switch over to my desktop and get into some demos. I'm going to demo the most basic case of Reloadium, and then I'm going to go over to, of all things, JavaScript and talk about that for a second, and then we'll come back to Reloadium. So with this in mind, I'm going to just reload a current function. I'm in Cake Shop, which is kind of directly stolen from the Reloadium website. I'm going to do it a little bit the normal way. I'll go in my IDE, PyCharm, and I'm going to run Cake Shop. And it's going to do the output I need. I'm going to go edit that to not come up in the console. So I'm going to run it, and I see the output. And if I want to see a different result, I type in a number, and I rerun it, and I see my result. But, you know, that's a little bit of context switching. Obviously, there's I've got to run it, and it's going to appear in another window, and there's a delay. Okay. There's a little bit more of a subtle thing. My eyeballs to see, I changed 32. When I want to see the impact of that change, my eyeballs have to go find it somewhere else. There's not a locality of behavior, to use Carson, the HTMX creators terms. Well, what I could do is set a breakpoint in here and run this under the PyCharm debugger. Stop at this point, and I get the locality, but I don't get the instant feedback. If I want to put this back and I save it, nothing happens. In order to see the updated result right here, sure, I'm now getting, thanks to the debugger, I'm getting locality. It's right beside the change, but I don't see the update until I rerun it, and now PyCharm will show me the updated value. That's kind of a Python thing. Even if Python knew that the change happened, it couldn't like reload the frame. That's what Reloadium does. So what I'll do this time is I will run this under Reloadium. So there's this icon here. There's this icon here. And it's the same icon as PyCharm's icons: run, debug, different color. And by the way, if any of you have questions, go ahead and type them in, because especially on this first one, I want to make sure we're all understanding before we get more complicated. This time I'm going to run it under Reloadium. Things are a little different. First of all, you'll see in the console, what I actually did was I ran Reloadium and then told Reloadium to run, essentially, when we get out far enough, my file. So this is now under the control of Reloadium. And I also get this extra tab that gives me some knobs, blah, blah, blah. Let's get to the point. Now, when I say, and you'll see when I save, when I save, you'll see a little pop-up down here that tells you that I saved. When I save, I get instantaneous feedback. I really didn't mean for 666 to get on the screen. Let me make this 31. Okay, that feels a little bit less evil. But that is the change in the developer workflow. It's instant. And this is more than just I'm saving time. I'm saving that context switch that Sajan was talking about. And we're also getting the locality of behavior so that the result is a lot closer to the thing that caused the change. I'm staying in the editor, which I think is really interesting. WebStorm's done interesting things on this. PyCharm's done interesting things on this. We want to do more in this year to keep you where you're editing. And then just obviously the performance of it helps reach a point that I'll try and talk a little bit more about, certainly in the next demo. And as you type, it's able to keep up with you as you type. Okay, I will pause there. Sajan, do you have any points you want to add to this? And we'll also come over and answer questions.
Yeah, sure. reloading current functions was one of the first things we started working on. We had identified that one of the main pain points of working on Python, as previously mentioned, were around disruption of concentration and disruption of to the state of flow. And to also add to another element of context switching to programming, as you mentioned earlier, where programmers may leave their station or change their focus towards other tasks, like a different item on their to-do list, or even catching up on the daily news in anticipation of the wait time for the program to restart. So to tackle this problem, Damien started working on updating functions, and then he started working on the solution to restart frames. These implementations have helped with preserving the program state and also helped with improving productivity for developers, for sure.
We'll go through some questions. There's one about, where do I get this thing? And the answer was already given, but I will try and pretend to be a helpful presenter and show you. If you go to plugins.jetbrains.com and search for Reloadium, you'll find 2 matches. One of them you don't want. You want this one from Reloadium. We will leave it to a separate discussion about WTF on the other one. It's not Sajan's fault. Okay, let's see. Back over to the discussions. Also, reloadware.io. Is that the website?
It's reloadium.io.
Reloadium.io. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so on to some points. Let's see. Daniel brings up a question about the new icons. Do they work with new UI? Clever watchers will know I'm not using the EAP for PyCharm 2023.1. I'm using the released version because I'm not crazy. I'm also not using new UI, which is hard for me because I'm 100% new UI. JetBrains is doing a UI overhaul, but I don't expect, since it's still in beta, I don't expect Damien to be keeping up to date with that. So the question of will it work with the UI, that's one to ask Damien. Maybe you can file a ticket in the repo. There is a repo on GitHub for this. This is generally available today in PyCharm. Yes. Wolf just installed it, and it is cool. Wait till you see some things later, especially Django. It did install so quick, and that's one of the big things that Reloadium does for you in the PyCharm plugin, is it bundles the package so that you don't have to install it in your virtual environment. I will show a way later that you can run it without the PyCharm plugin, like if you're in another editor or something. Okay. Does it work with Python 3.11 yet? Not surprised. It took a while to get working on the M1, for example. Damien didn't have access to build targets for this. There are C extensions behind this. Maybe ask a question in a ticket or something about plans for 3.11. And yes, Reloadium on PyPI is the same thing. If you go to the website, you'll see link to documentation, and documentation shows you how to run it, how to install it with pip, and how to run it outside of the plugin. Okay, and Christopher asks about run. I will show run under Django. It doesn't really make sense to hot module reload something after the process is exited. So it only makes sense in something that has a long running process. If you're not running under the debugger and stopped at a breakpoint. So Django, Flask, Pygame, these are all examples of things that go into a server loop. Before I go on, Sajan, do you have anything you want to add to what I just demoed beyond what you already said?
No, that's good. Thank you.
All right, cool. Let's take a little interlude and let's head over to our good friend, WebStorm. Okay. In WebStorm, I'm going to recreate this as you type mode. I'm in Markdown. And in Markdown, I can get this preview and I can, for example, wrap this in bold. And as I type, I get instant feedback. Instant feedback. That kind of as you type mode is really intriguing to me. And I've been wondering, what if you were editing a Django template and you could just render it as you type and have that kind of feedback? Would people value that, or a React component or whatever? And so that having a way to keep up with the execution as you type is really interesting to me. If you look at hot module reloading, that topic in the world of JavaScript, for example, I will go to a component and I have it running under the dev server, under React's dev server. That's the thing that watches for changes, knows that that JavaScript object, that function changed, and does the very weird magic in JavaScript to patch the runtime. And so if I've got this component, and let's say I go to a preview, and I'm going to do this in the browser, in the IDE's browser. I'll go run this, and I'm going to change this from edit to code. I think I have restarted my dev server. I think that's my problem. Okay. I'll put this back to edit. And you see it's keeping up with me. And this is hot module reloading in action. It's patching JavaScript and sending and executing it and sending it to the browser and updating the JavaScript runtime in the browser. That was my error. When I ran it, it's actually running over on another window that I hadn't even noticed. There's a question about linking to the plugin. So let me get the... I'll paste this in chat, and I'll paste the website. Oh, not that. Sorry, everybody. I should have done this earlier. So that's this idea of hot module reloading in JavaScript. Let me explain something. They've been doing this multiple generations. They've done this 5, 6, 7, 8 years. They have something called time travel, where they preserve all the revisions of objects and state. So you could go into some tool and move and see how it was before the last change and the previous change. They've made it really fast. They've handled more edge cases. They've exposed plugins, APIs, so that you can customize it for certain circumstances. It's all really fascinating, and we are way behind in the world of Python on this. But again, I just want to get you back to this idea of as you type development. Sajan, got anything you want to add to this?
No, that covers a fair amount. Thank you.
Let's see. I will check over here in any more comments. Okay, good. I think we're covered. If anybody has experience with front-end development and JavaScript, HMR, in particular, this later generation that's more aggressive with HMR, please give us some comments. I'd like to learn from you as well. Okay, so that is WebStorm. Let's go on to the next demo. And the next demo is multi-file reloading. So in this case, as Sajan said, this is the simplest possible case. I have a function. I'm stopped in that function. The only changes were in that function. So let me split right here, calc 1. So in this case, I have a 2-module project, cleverly named Calculator 1, and Calculator 2 is on the right. Calculator 2 imports from Calculator 1. Again, I could do the normal things. I can run it and see some output, make my changes, run it again. take my time waiting for the result. My eyeballs have to move over down here and then go back to what was happening up there. I could also run this under the PyCharm debugger, as we mentioned, and make some changes. I'll see the results, but I won't see the results of the changes. We want to do the same thing again. We want to run it under Reloadium. All right. EPDB is time travel debugged. Oh, great. Hey, Avil, hopefully I had that correct. Can you paste a link to that? So now I'm running this instead of the PyCharm debugger. I'm running this under Reloadium, which then runs the debugger. I'm stopped on this breakpoint. You see my result is 8. And so I could change that and get a different result. Same thing we just saw. But what if I changed constant, which is actually in a different module? Would I expect it? Let me put this back to 2. Would I expect this to update? And indeed it does. All right, you may say that's a simple case. It's a freestanding variable at module scope. Show me something impressive. Go change the instance value in a class in another module. Will that work? All right, so I did get my update. That is something that for all I know, Reloadium is the only Python one that can do that. It's getting kind of on the edge of hard computer science stuff, tracking these dependencies, knowing if you're going to get circular imports. That's a hard problem. Knowing when to bail out when you can't solve the problem. I'm going to do another example. This is one you wouldn't have expected from hot module reloading, but it's more in line with let's reinvent the developer experience. Let's say I come here and I make this a string. What would you expect to happen when I save? We get an inline error at the location that the error happened, where the traceback was thrown. Otherwise, I would have had to come down to the console and go read a traceback, a possibly very long traceback, and then put the debugger back where it was, and then put my eyes back into my editor. I figure out what the problem is. I put it back. When I save, instantaneous updating and instantaneous feedback that I fixed the error, not just that I changed the value. So again, I'd like all of us in this webinar and in this chat and stuff like that to be getting a little creative and thinking about how can we put the focus into the editor and, as Sajan said, stay in the flow. Sajan, comments?
Yeah, multi-file reloading is a very unique feature to Reloadium's approach on hot reloading in Python. This helps ease a lot of annoyance and frustration, as you can imagine, because it saves you from having to constantly make manual adjustments on multiple documents. And as we know, humans are very prone to error. When we manually try to make these adjustments, we might miss something out and then end up using up more time to make these fixes. So automating tasks that can be automated and reloading multiple files and their dependent code lines makes perfect sense.
I'm answering a couple of questions in here. There's a question from Augusto, but I didn't quite understand it. So Augusto, I might need a little bit more input from you on that. This is something interesting to see, like issue history on how Damien has tackled this, implemented this, refined it, fixed bugs in it, and stuff like that. Okay, we're going to do a little bit of an aside and go into how it works. We talked about this a little bit at the top, but now that you've seen it, we can talk a little bit more about it. We saw it in JavaScript. I just gave a demo of it in JavaScript, and Avil explained a package for it in JavaScript. We saw it in Python. There are other packages that are mature that do parts of this. Jurigged was the first one that I saw that looked interesting. There's a demo from Guido like 10, 12 years ago that does a very limited version. Jurigged was a big step forward beyond that, introduced this idea of creating a new code object and then swapping it in. This frame swapping and module swapping and stuff like that with new code and executing in a sandbox and keeping track of circular dependencies. I believe these might all be unique to Reloadium. I might be wrong, but go look at the tickets in the repo and you'll learn more about it. Questions from the audience. Anybody have any questions about implementation that I will probably pretend to answer incorrectly? Let's see. Niall said this is a game changer. Yes, it is, especially when you get into web application development or data science when startup times are expensive. Keenan is asking about Stack Overflow and highlight that error as well. That's an interesting point. Describe more about the kind of UX of that, Keenan. How would you like it portrayed into the IDE? Hello, Chris May. How does Reloadium work? Christopher Reed is asking. High memory consumption. That's an interesting question because you are, as I understand it, creating this other like Python interpreter or something, this other code sandbox. I might still be in the same interpreter, but you're going to create a new code object. It will have whatever values are in that frame. So it will consume more memory. Maybe it messes up the garbage collector. I don't know. Maybe that's the kind of problem that Damien had to go off in his sabbatical and really deal with. I do not know about time travel debug to Reloadium. Very good question. Sajan, can you go back to Damien and ask him later if there are any plans for time travel debug? And I will give you a chance. Follow Twitter or follow Reloadium on Twitter, and Sajan will get an answer for you and do a tweet for that. Sajan, how do you feel about that?
Sounds perfect.
All right. Keenan has a good point about stacks and how, what's the stack limit and a recursive call in Python. It's compiled in. You can set a flag, I think, to adjust it, but you certainly don't want to blow your stack. And get into a recursion. I believe I saw that Damien does track that and knows when you get into a cycle, I think. Sajan, does it work with Jupyter? Is there on the Reloadium page, is there an example with Jupyter?
At the moment, I think we're basically just limited our products to JetBrains IDEs. We haven't attempted other ones. With Jupyter, I'm not too sure.
It's an interesting one because, Jupyter is a server application, and you have a web application, I should say, web application server, and you have integrations for Django and Flask. So one could imagine that that is a feasible thing for the future.
Yeah, definitely. I think it might actually work already, but so again, sorry, I'm not too technically savvy here. So, but I can try to get the answer for you guys.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Again, follow Reloadium on Twitter and you can get some answers. And Humair, the question about what is hot reload, the idea that you make a change in code and instead of having to rerun the entire application, which might take a second or might take a minute, instead you execute just the change and copy it into the running program to replace the old version of that code. All right. It's a little bit like fixing a plane while it's already flying. Maybe that's a good way to put it. Okay, on to Django views. Before I switch to that, Sajan, any other comments from any responses to stuff in the chat that you want to take?
No, I might have to just look at them offline with Damien and see if we can reply to them.
Cool. All right. What I will do is I'll go back to the preview and I'll bring up the local preview again. And then I'll bring up views. Oh, that's not what I wanted. I wanted over here. There. No, not there either. Come on, Paul, get with the program. There. And then split. Views. Okay, I'm in a Django application. And I'm in a Django application, and I have a class-based view index view, and it gets a query set of question objects and does some filtering and returns some of them. So for example, I can go to my Django server, run it. It's running down here. And I go to the page for it, and you see the page. Now, if I want to only show 2 of these questions, then what I would do is save it. And I get, after a couple of seconds, the entire Python process exits, restarts, loads Django, connects to the database, and starts listening again, but certainly doesn't tell my browser to reload. Before I get too far into this and show the cool part, I'll see if we have any questions. That's a pregnant pause. That's not nice. Okay, is there some way to get info? I'm sorry, the question from Augusto is beyond my ability. So alas, you'll have to ask on Twitter or file a ticket in the Reloadium repo. Wolf, you can see me on Mastodon. I haven't made the switch really yet too much. And no, I don't believe that Reloadium is using the new UI, which is still in beta and still changing. So it's okay that Damien has to do it. Avil, right now I am in one project, one PyCharm project, just switching files. Okay, so I'm going to do, what I could do is I could run this under the debugger. And then when this page loads, it will stop execution there. Oh, I'll leave that out. But that's not really going to help me. We saw that before about the problems in the changes. So instead, what I'm going to do is put a breakpoint here. And I'm going to run this under Reloadium, but I'm not going to run it under the debugger. I'm going to leave this breakpoint out. I'm just going to do run it. So it runs and it tells me, okay, Reloadium, this is your version. Hey, give us a star. And I'm watching some stuff. That's what Reloadium says. Here's what I'm watching. This brings up a point about configuration. If you look at the Reloadium docs, you can see there are multiple knobs available for saying, like a comment on a line saying, don't watch this line. Or going to a config file and saying, don't watch that stuff over there. They actually have more knobs than that. You can write Python functions that say, run this function before a change or run this function after a change, which kind of tells you that Reloadium is starting to get mature because Damien is adding those kinds of things. So with that in mind, I will go and I think I will need to switch back to the preview and load this back up because it's detached from the. Right, so I'm on this page. It's only showing 2, but I want 5 back. Did you see how fast that was? I want 2 back. I want them all. I want 1. Oop, well, see, can't do that. I want 1. I could, for example, do a real coding session. We're like, okay, I want to make a variable out of that. I'll call this the count. Now, when I change that, I want 3. A little bit more of a sophisticated than just changing a value. The entire code frame re-executed. That was as you type. As soon as I type, in fact, if Damien wanted to, he could hook it up to the PyCharm facility that was hooked into autosaving, and you didn't even have to save in order to see the update. In fact, this could actually be even faster. We're still running an HTTP server. We could hook it up. That's a Chromium Java widget over there. We can just calculate it and shove the string in there. So that is running in Django, not under the debugger. We're just running, and it's seeing a change, and it's re-executing the view code, patching the running server, and telling the browser to reload. That's what Reloadium is giving you. We'll stop there, and Sajan, you give some comments on this, and I'll look over in the chat.
Yeah, sure. I guess as one of the most popular Python frameworks, providing out-of-the-box experience with Django was a great way to connect to our end users, programmers, and to help them with an improved user experience in both front-end and back-end development settings. And as you mentioned, Reloadium also allows for automatic page refreshing within the back-end development setting, which was only previously available in the front end.
Okay, so let's see. Edwin asks if this work. He's not really asking a Reloadium question. He's asking a PyCharm professional question. Yes, PyCharm professional has a databases tool. This database is SQLite, and it's connected. And I can go. Actually, I don't think I connected this to the database file, but it can browse the database, browse the tables, do all of the stuff. It's in a product we have called Data Grip. And Data Grip is bundled with PyCharm Professional. Go to the page for Data Grip and blow your mind. This is a Reloadium webinar. Back to Reloadium. My friend Nafil Islam's in the house. Nafil's asking if this works with Live Edit. He and I were big friends of Live Edit. Nafil, believe it or not, what they're showing here, I think, is their thing. They're telling the browser to reload. I think Reloadium is doing some weirdo Django middleware kind of something here. This is not what you normally get with Django. Maybe we can make a request. Sajan, do you know any of the Reloadium guys?
Yeah, Reloadium guys in terms of what, sorry?
That was a trick question. You are the Reloadium guy. So maybe I could lobby you to get something added to the website to explain how this reloading in Django works.
Yeah.
Or something in the docs, maybe.
Sure.
All right. Nafil, I didn't answer your question. I just admitted I don't know. But based on what you and I both know about Live Edit, it's pretty cool. Augusto, yes, there are some, I believe there are environment variables in Reloadium that govern some of the behavior. They're not exactly what you're looking for there. Let's see. Works in run mode. Yes, it works in run mode as well. For those of you who think I've shown the cool thing, the cool thing's next. Yes, in fact, it does work with Flask. Let me bring that up. Leave this over in my other window, my other monitor. On the Reloadium website, under features, you'll see Django and Flask and Pygame and stuff like that. Reloadium is like magic, yes. Yes, we've had a couple of questions about new UI. I don't expect necessarily. I can't yell at Damien for not supporting new UI. It's still in beta, but in the next couple of months, he's going to need to get that done. All right. Okay, so that covers the Django integration. There are other things I could show for Django, but I want to get on to the next point. Data frames, pandas. So I'm going to unsplit all. No, not that. Unsplit all. And I'm going to go to pandas example. I'm going to stop this. Okay, and so very simple data frame. Duh, I could, run this. Still, I was poking around with this. I added this to the configurations. I could run this in normal PyCharm run mode. Not very interesting. I could set a breakpoint here. I could stop at that point. Okay, well, that's pretty cool. And PyCharm has this view as data frame thing, but that doesn't really help me with the poking around. I just changed the value. Data frame didn't update. This is PyCharm Professional Scientific View that can show plots and things like that without the need of Jupyter or anything like that. So what if instead I did this under Reloadium? Would Reloadium cause my visualization to update? Well, of course, I wouldn't have put it in the webinar if it didn't. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, get out of the PyCharm debugger and run this under Reloadium's debugger. Going to stop on that breakpoint. I get a chance again to view as data frame. So I see the data frame. What if I change this to 12? Oh, it updated. Yeah, great. Okay. What if I change that to 120? Oh, too high. Inline error message for the win. What if I change that to 3? What if I change that? What if I change that to 9? Now, imagine this was a really big data frame where it took a long time to load. And you just wanted to change the little bit that adjusted the visualization or the derivation or anything like that. Then as a data scientist, would I like instantaneous feedback? I think I would like instantaneous feedback. Sajan, got anything you want to add about your customers and what they want from data science?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess a lot of our users with background in data sciences, such as machine learning and AI, have been able to benefit from Reloadium when using Pandas, because it allows users to only start up their program once, as you mentioned. And unlike without Reloadium, they don't have to worry about fully starting it up again. This makes programming in data science space very efficient.
All right. Kim said happy banana for having data science integration. So possibly another happy customer. All right. We're getting a little low on time. So let's get to the thing that I think is really cool. We talk about performance and the turnaround time and the change in the experience, the developer experience of having all this stuff really close, really right where you're editing, and you don't have to go do anything different. The answer you're looking for is brought to you. Let's talk profiling. Let's have a conversation about profiling, because none of y'all out there doing profiling, and you all know you should be doing profiling, but most of you just aren't doing profiling. What if we really brought profiling to you? Let's see what Reloadium has to offer on this. This is a very complex function, as you can see. It sleeps a lot. I can run this, and it runs. But what is these? Some of these sleeps were a long time, meaning compute intensive tasks or something like that. Then you would be sitting here a while running this, playing with the knobs, running this, playing with the knobs, etc. You could set a breakpoint and run it on the debugger, but it's not going to help you with the turnaround time. So instead, I'm going to set a breakpoint here, and I'm going to run it under the Reloadium debugger. Not you. We're done with you. Speedy. Okay, Speedy. I want Speedy to run under the debugger. Look at what Reloadium did in the sidebar. it put profiling information for this function in a color-coded heat map telling you which lines were fast and slow. For example, this one took 1.31 milliseconds. This one took 77.2. If I wanted different details, I could just right-click in the gutter in PyCharm and see all that information. But maybe that's noise. I just want colors. And I could always go down here, do some configuration on what parts of the execution of that frame I am profiling. So again, this idea of, oh, sorry, didn't do the important part. I can go up here and make this one slow. And it reran, and oh yeah, that was slow. Maybe what I want is not so slow. Oh yeah, that's not so slow. Okay, that's a lot better. So that is Reloadium. We think of Reloadium as helping you run your code with hot module reloading, run your code with debugging, but it's also profiling your code as you type with hot module reloading. Sajan, got anything you want to add to profiling?
Yeah, sure. I guess the decision to collect time and memory information from just the local frame came about because making it globally enabled feature would slow down the execution of the program too much. Although it would be a great feature to have, our attempts to make it work globally have not been successful yet. But we are working towards an alternative compromise also by collecting global functions call times, and this may not produce as detailed time information, but it will provide overall indications of these slow functions. So programmers could then direct their attention towards these functions and profile them locally for more information to help with pinpointing slow code lines and assist programmers in optimization. The visualization in the gutter is mainly an user experience feature. It allows for a more natural way, a more intuitive way of working without having to open a new window or press too many buttons. It's ever present, and varying colors give indications of how much time or memory is being used in the current code line. So by default, as you saw there, yellow would generally mean slower and taking up more memory, and purple would mean that it's faster and taking up less memory.
I'm really happy with that experimentation you're doing. I don't know what's the right answer. I think you are already on your way to many right answers. How can we get people to do profiling? How can we get people to use tooling in Python? That's going to be an open question. Over to some comments. Rolf asks, will it work with Fast API? I wouldn't expect it to, but Sajan's right here. So now he knows that there was a question about Fast API and whether that's planned. Sajan?
Yeah, I think I'll have to take that one offline as well.
Yeah,
And
no
check
problem.
with Damien and Ked back.
Augusto, we showed earlier that, yes, there are two plugins. One of them, the hey.com, stay away from it. It's not the right one. Let's see. Some good comments. Yaniva asks, can you make changes in the debugger console and they will take effect in the runtime? Actually, you bring up a good point. I didn't show this running outside of the plugin. So if you go to the terminal, I don't have it close. So it's Reloadium and then Python and then Speedy. Oh yeah, Python manage.py run server. I believe that's it. Am I not in my virtual environment? Anyway, the documentation shows running it from outside of the PyCharm plugin. I had this yesterday. Well, I bet it's in my other editor session. So yes, I believe that anything that changes, well, no, if you make it a debugger console, you're not changing the source file on disk. No, I don't think that will work. Let's see. Thank you to all of you for the kind words. Profiling memory instead of time. I haven't poked at that. That would be quite interesting. All right. And let's see. I think that is, yes, Sajan knows about the other plugin. I'll just leave it at that. It's Sajan, you're handling that issue about the other plugin, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So it was a extension that was being created by another program. We're looking into that separately.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the demo part, and we will switch back over to the slides. Thanks, Sajan, for joining us and helping us do a little bit of a reveal on Reloadium and talking about HMR in the world of Python, what your company's up to with Reloadware. What's the one takeaway point you want our good friends in chat to take?
Hot reloading is a powerful feature that will help developers and to make work more efficient and improve your workflow and to deliver better quality software. So please find our plugin on PyCharm's JetBrains marketplace and watch it make a difference to your workflow. We'd love to get some feedback. Reach out to us on Twitter, and love to hear from you.
I would love for them to hear from all of you as well. Reloadium is bringing us into a world of rethinking the way we do development. And I think it's really cool. And one of you out there has the next big idea. Get involved and share it. All right, on to the standard on the way out information. If you'd like to get more information on PyCharm, go to our website at jetbrains.com/PyCharm. If you haven't already, check out our PyCharm blog where you can find up-to-date news about releases and events. We're starting to get big time into the 2023.1 release cycle. Lots of important things coming this year. You'll also find educational resources such as this webinar. Got another webinar coming up in a few weeks with Charlie Marsh from Rough. He's going to show us how to lint 4 trillion files in under a millisecond. We'd love your feedback on this webinar, so please feel free to contact us on Twitter or in the after webinar survey, which we'll email in a bit. That's all from us today. Thank you very much for joining us and hope you have a nice day.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everyone.